Dames en heren, wilt u allemaal gaan zitten? We gaan beginnen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. We are about to start, and please switch off your phones.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you all to this media conference of the Joint Investigation Team referred to the MH17 JIT. I especially welcome the relatives and friends of the victims, including those who are following this conference via the live stream. My name is Peter Crozier. I'm an Assistant Commissioner of the Australian Federal Police. Since 2014, Belgium, Malaysia, the Netherlands, Ukraine and Australia have been cooperating as a joint investigation team on one of the most complex criminal investigations ever to be conducted. the investigation into the downing of Malaysia Airlines Flight MH17 on 17 July 2014 over Ukraine. A tragedy that connects our 5 countries and so many others, both directly and indirectly. An investigation which is outside the capacity of any individual country to undertake on its own. Representatives of all the JIC countries are present today, and I would like to take the opportunity to introduce them to you. Mr Mohammed Hanifi bin Zakaria, Solicitor General 3 of the Malaysia Attorney General's Chambers. Mr Frederick van Leo, Federal Prosecutor, Chief Federal Prosecutor of the Belgian Federal Prosecutor's Office. Mr Yuri Lutsenko, Prosecutor General of Ukraine. Mr Fred Westerbakker, Chief Public Prosecutor of the National Prosecutor's Office of the Netherlands. And Mr Wilbert Poulsen, Chief Constable of the National Police of the Netherlands. I understand my colleagues will speak to those attending and the media representatives later today. The working languages of the conference are English and Dutch. The JIC Coordinator, Mr Westerbakker, and Chief Constable Poulsen will address you today. This presentation will conclude with a call for witnesses, and afterwards there will be an opportunity to ask questions of my JIC colleagues. I will now ask Mr Westerbakker to address you.
Dames en heren.
Ladies and gentlemen, based on the investigation of the Joint Investigation Team, we have decided to prosecute 4 suspects for downing flight MH17. This is the start of the Dutch criminal proceedings. This airplane, Malaysia Airlines Flight MH17, with its 298 passengers, ended up in an area almost 5 years ago in eastern Ukraine where an armed conflict was going on. That conflict is still going on today, turning an area of war into a crime scene. This made finding the perpetrators complicated. From the first moment on, we hear a lot of theories about the cause of the disaster, as well as the question, who are responsible? Often these theories are based on mistrust, on assumptions, and regularly even on deliberately presented untruths. This creates insecurity and unrest with the relatives of the victims. The Dutch Safety Board has taken the first important step in 2015 to provide them with clarity in times of insecurity. The board has investigated the cause of the crash and concluded that flight MH17 was shot from the eastern part of the Ukraine by a Buk missile from the 9M38 series. The investigation of the JIT also focused on, next to the question what exactly happened on the 17th of July 2014, the question who were responsible for that crime. Bringing justice to the victim of this crime has always been our driving force. We also want to provide the family of the victims with answers, but we can only disclose findings of the investigation that are legally and beyond doubt and can be substantiated, and who do not frustrate the interest of the investigation. The starting point is that the courtroom is the venue where we have to present our case. We've always said that we have faith that we will achieve our goal. That goal was and is to find the truth and to criminally prosecute those responsible. Today, I can tell you that we've come to this stage where we can say that we are going to prosecute. It's 4 people who we held accountable as suspects for bringing in the deadly weapon, a Bactila, into the eastern Ukraine. We will tell you in a minute who they are. First, I want to show you what we found earlier.
JIT announced that flight MH17 had been shot down by a Buk missile from the 9M38 series. The missile had been fired from an agricultural field near Pervomaisky by a Bactila, which had been brought in from the Russian Federation. And after flight MH17 had been shot down, that Bactila was brought back to the Russian Federation. At that time, the JIT was looking at about 100 individuals who could in some way be associated with the transport of that Bactila and the shooting down of flight MH17. Further investigation was needed to show whether they had played a criminal role. In May 2018, the JIT announced that the Bactila that shot down flight MH17 came from the 53rd Anti-Aircraft Missile Brigade of the Russian Armed Forces. We showed the unique combination of specific characteristics of this Bactila, based on which we were able to identify this Bactila. We also said that the group of about 100 individuals had decreased. The role of many of them had become a lot clearer to us. In the meantime, it had appeared that a large number of these persons were not criminally involved.
Dames en heren,
Ladies and gentlemen, in the past 5 years, we've been able to decrease the number of persons that we're investigating. Throughout the years, the investigation consisted of a forensic investigation, finding and interrogating witnesses and experts, the analysis of radar and satellite images, evaluating big quantities of telecom data, such as recorded phone conversations, and also the analysis of big data. And the area of investigation in the eastern Ukraine is still inaccessible for the research team. This, of course, leads to the fact that we haven't been able to accomplish certain investigative acts, and that some other investigations take more time than usual. On the other hand, we've been able to acquire a lot of valuable telecom data from the Ukraine, along with other sorts of information in the past year. And as of this day, in the JIT, more than 50 detectives and a team of about 25 staff members of the Public Prosecution Bureau are working on the investigation. And part of the Australian and Dutch detectives are still permanently present on the field office in Kiev, where they work in close cooperation with the Ukrainian detectives. And this cooperation is still a valuable part of the investigation. Throughout the years, we've made multiple calls for witnesses, and these have resulted in valuable information that is invaluable for the investigation. Because of this, we will round off this meeting with a new call for witnesses in order to make sure that we go further, that we make more progress in our investigation, because the investigation will continue. We realize that the witnesses in this case are sticking out their necks and run a potential risk. So, therefore, we take the safety of the witnesses very seriously. Beside witnesses and data from telecom sources, social media is also an important part of the research. We screen an enormous amount of data on a daily basis. This we do with the help of advanced tools for analysis, specially developed computer programs, and relevant information is analyzed and investigated. And in this way, we are still gathering new data for our investigation, because we will start prosecuting now, but the investigation will continue. Today, we will send out international arrest warrants for the first suspects that we will prosecute. They will also be placed on national and international wanted lists. And because of that, we will reveal their full names and we will show you their pictures. And the 4 persons are Igor Girkin, Sergei Dubinsky, Oleg Pulatov, and Leonid Karchenko. Suspects Girkin, Dubinsky, and Pulatov have the Russian nationality, and our information points to the fact that they currently reside in Russia. Suspect Garchenko has the Ukrainian nationality, and we assume that he resides in eastern Ukraine. This is an area that is currently not under supervision of the central authorities in Kiev. On the 17th of July 2014, all 4 suspects were in eastern Ukraine. They played a crucial part in the armed conflict, and they had important positions. And the video will further explain.
Shefolodovich Gierkin, also known as Jelkov or Piave, born on the 17th of December 1970, is a former colonel of the FSB, the Russian Federal Security Service. Sergei Nikolaevich Dubinsky, also known as Khmury, born on the 9th of August 1962, was employed by the GRU, the Russian Military Intelligence Service. Suspect Oleg Yuldashevich Pulatov, also known as Jurza, born on the 24th of July 1966, is a former soldier of the Spetsnaz GRU, the special forces of that military intelligence service. In the past, all were sent abroad as soldiers in the service of the Russian armed forces. Leonid Volodymyrovich Kharchenko, also known as Krot, is the only Ukrainian suspect. He was born on the 10th of January 1972 and has no military background. In July 2014, he led a combat unit in the Donetsk region as a commander. At that time, from the spring of 2014, a fierce battle raged in eastern Ukraine. On the 12th of May 2014, pro-Russian fighters proclaimed parts of eastern Ukraine as so-called Donetsk People's Republic and Luhansk People's Republic. Although these areas are not independent states, administratively they are organized that way. The armed groups, for example, appointed their own prime ministers and ministers, and they consider themselves the armies of their people's republics. Igor Gerkin was appointed Minister of Defense and was given the highest position in the army of the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic. From this area, flight MH17 was downed. He was the commander there on the 17th of July 2014. Being the highest military officer and so-called Minister of Defense, Girkin was in direct contact with the Russian Federation. Suspect Dubinsky was one of Girkin's deputies and also head of the intelligence service. He was in regular contact with officials in Russia as well. Oleg Pulatov was the deputy head of that intelligence service and one of the deputies of Dubinsky. And suspect Kharchenko was under the direct supervision of Dubinsky and led a military unit in the region as the commander. From the so-called defense minister to the commander on the ground, together they formed a chain linking the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic with the Russian Federation. It was through this chain the suspects were able to get heavy military equipment from Russia to the battlefield in eastern Ukraine, and in this way, the Baktila of the 53rd Brigade could be transported to the agricultural field in Pervomaisky, and its missile could be fired, with terrible consequences.
We will get back to that chain later on. We will not zoom into all the facts today that have led to the suspicion against these suspects. If it's about specific deeds and our evidence against individual persons, the courtroom is the only venue where we, as Public Prosecution Service, can speak openly. What, based on the findings of the investigation, we can disclose is the following. Suspects Girkin, Dubinsky, Pulatov, and Kharchenko were active in the armed conflict in the province Donetsk in July 2014. Their common goal in this period was to gain ground at the expense of the Ukrainian state and its armed forces. During these battles, anti-aircraft defense was used. The Public Prosecution Service suspects the 4 suspects of the fact that their plan, their cooperation, and their acts on and around July 2014 have led to the shooting of flight MH17. Even though they have not pushed the button themselves, there is a suspicion that they have closely cooperated in order to obtain the Bactieler and put it in position on the launch site with the goal to shoot a plane. Therefore, they can be considered to be suspects together of shooting flight MH17. In Dutch criminal law, persons who are not present themselves during the implementation of a crime but do play an important organizing role are just as punishable as the persons who have actually committed the crime. The following suspects are prosecuted for causing the crash of MH17 leading to the death of all the people on board, punishable under Section 168 of the Dutch Criminal Code, and second, murdering 298 passengers of flight MH17, punishable under Section 289 of the Dutch Criminal Code. When deciding to prosecute these suspects and formulating the changes, we have taken into account the armed conflict that was going on back then. The possibility exists that the suspects wanted to shoot a military airplane instead of a passenger flight. Even if that was the original plan, we do hold them responsible for downing MH17. What they actually knew, wanted, and eventually did will have to be established by the court during the criminal proceedings. We realize that this short summary does not answer a lot of questions that you might have about, for example, the available evidence. I underline that we will only disclose the charges against these suspects. It is up to the Court of The Hague to pass sentence on these accusations based on the case file. The suspects will have the opportunity to explain their side of the story in court. Then what's next? On the short term, we will formally request the Russian Federation to submit a summons to the suspects who are in the Russian Federation. We will also ask Russia to question the suspects about the charges. A similar formal request will be sent to Ukraine with regards to the Ukrainian suspect. For all four suspects, it goes that we will not ask for extradition because the Russian as well as the Ukrainian constitution prohibits extraditing nationals. We do request the Russian Federation, again, to cooperate with a mutual legal assistance request. We still have unanswered questions. We are, for example, waiting for the question where this Bactieler that was filmed in July 2014 in a convoy of the 53rd Brigade of the Russian Federation, where it was on and around the 17th of July 2014, and we've asked them over a year ago. The Russian Federation refuses to answer other questions as well. For example, the question if suspect Dubinsky worked for the Russian government in July 2014. These are simple questions. We invite the Russian Federation to answer these questions quickly, as well as the other questions included in the request for mutual legal assistance. Of course, we are open to a direct reaction of the suspects. All four suspects have given public interviews earlier about their role in the armed conflict in 2014. If they wish to explain directly to the JIT their role, we would like to hear so. Therefore, they can contact us through the communication channels that we will disclose later. We have informed the court about the decision to prosecute and the fact that we are finalizing the extensive digital case file. We expect to be able to hand this filed to the court before the end of the year. The criminal proceedings will take place at the court in The Hague, who holds session on the extra secured Schiphol Criminal Justice Complex. In 2017, the 5 JIT countries have already decided that prosecution under Dutch law before a Dutch court is the best option. The court informed us that the criminal proceedings against these suspects will start on the 9th of March 2020 at 10 a.m. We expressly appeal for the suspects to note down the time and date and to report in to be present during the criminal trial or to contact us beforehand. The criminal trial will take place even when the suspects choose not to be present. The JIT has informed the family of the victims as much as they could about the progress of the investigation. Pending the prosecution, we will inform them about the upcoming criminal trial as well as the position that they might have. Therefore, the National Police, Victim Support Netherlands, and the Public Prosecution Service will organize an information meeting for all family of the victims this fall. Legal as well as practical questions with regards to the upcoming trial will be addressed. Family and relatives of the victims who cannot be present will receive that information digitally. For us and everybody who has been involved in the disaster with MH17, today is a day that can never be forgotten. We have promised the family of the victims to try our hardest to establish who are responsible for the death of their loved ones and to hold these people account during a public trial. I am relieved that we can uphold our promise to the bereaved. The JIT suspects Gherkin, Dubinsky, Pulatov, and Karchenko of having played a significant role in the death of 298 innocent civilians. The means of evidence these suspicions are based on will be elaborated on during the criminal proceedings. Then the judge will pass sentence. The suspects are innocent until the contrary is proven in court. That's the way it's supposed to go in a state under the rule of law.
The tragedy of MH17 has connected our many countries over the past 5 years in the most profound and unprecedented way. We all mourn our victims and remain steadfast in our resolve to holding to those responsible to account. Last week, representatives of the judicial authorities of grieving nations met in The Hague in a meeting organised by Eurojust, where they expressed their commitment to the years ahead, just as Belgium, Malaysia, Ukraine and Australia have done. The representatives of Canada, Germany, Indonesia, Italy, New Zealand, Romania, South Africa, the United States and the United Kingdom have expressed their confidence in the Dutch legal system. The Dutch Public Prosecution Service has gratefully accepted that confidence in the knowledge that a complex international criminal case such as this one will place considerable demands on all of us over the coming years. To complement the ongoing prosecution, the MH17 JIT is focused on maintaining the momentum of the investigation. In line with this, the JIT are today making a further appeal for witnesses to come forward. I will ask my colleague, Chief Constable Pullison, to provide you with further details in this regard.
Ik ga u meenemen door de getuigenoproep.
Well, I will also go over the call for witnesses with you, and that will reveal further details about the investigation. We've made an important step here today as the JIT But our decision to prosecute 4 persons doesn't mean that our investigation ends. Multiple people played their part in the downing of the MH17 flight. And the investigation will also continue with regards to the crew of the Bucktailor and also people that formed an important link in the chain of command in the Russian Federation regarding military support to the eastern Ukraine. The call for witnesses that I will do now has the purpose to get maximum clarity about the entire chain of responsible parties. And the message that we give out today is twofold. On the one hand, we will prosecute 4 suspects, but the investigation towards the involvement of other people will proceed. Last year, we've also asked a number of questions about the crew of the Bucktailor and the Bucktailor itself. Of course, we also asked those questions to the Russian Federation. The country, however, told us that they'd see no reason to answer these questions, but also without this cooperation, we've advanced in our investigation. And that is why we again turn to the public with questions we would like to see answered. We will give you some samples from telephone conversations that were recorded, and we will show you parts from a chat conversation. These are represented in English, but of course with translation, and the full audio and tape recordings will be available on the website of the research team. Just to take you back in the past, in 2015, we already published a tap conversation on the 17th of July 2014 at 8:09 in the morning. And herein, suspect Dubinsky asks whether it came with crew, and his partner in the conversation confirms that it came with the crew. And with it, of course, is meant the Bucktailor, and in the meantime, we've established that this is a teller from the 3rd Battalion of the 53rd Anti-Aircraft Missile Brigade from Russian Kursk. Based on this conversation and other results, it's plausible that not only the Bucktailor, but also its crew came from the Russian Federation. And then another conversation from the 17th of July 2014 at 9:32 in the evening. We've put online before. It's a conversation between suspect Karchenko and a man that he calls Ryazan. And this man speaks to Karchenko or calls him commander.
Юра, ты уехал уже, да? Я пошел по своей задаче, вы по своей. Ты здесь боец потерял, с зенитной установки свой экипаж проебал, блядь.
В какой установке?
С Бука.
С Бука?
Да.
А где он, блядь?
Вот на блокпосту стоит.
Бери его сюда, блядь, и вези, я буду в Снежном его ждать.
Хорошо.
Dit gesprek kennelijk...
Apparently, one of the crew members of the Bucktailor that shot down the MH17 from sky a little bit before lost part of its crew. And Karchenko tells them to bring that crew member to him. And of course, the JIT wants to know who this crew member was. And from this conversation, you cannot conclude from which brigade this crew is from, but the JIT, however, has evidence from other sources that Russian military personnel of the 53rd Brigade were at the time close to the border with the eastern Ukraine. A lot of the soldiers were also active on social media. We'll now show you an excerpt from a chat of 2015 in which a soldier of the 2nd Battalion of the 53rd Brigade looks back on the summer of 2014. So the chat here is shown in English, and the full version in Russian will be placed online.
Convoy that departed on the 23rd of June 2014 from the base of the 53rd Brigade in Kursk and headed towards Milerovo in the Russian Federation. This convoy also included the Bucktailor with the 3 and the 2 on the side. The soldier chats with a certain Anastasia. He tells her that they did not reach Rostov, but have passed Milerovo and Kamensk, and stayed in the forest at Koibyshevo for 3 months. Anastasia asks him in which battalion he serves. The soldier tells her that he was in the 2nd Battalion, but they were traveling with some cool guys from the 3rd. It was a Bakhtila from the 3rd Battalion that shot down MH17 in eastern Ukraine. The first lieutenant the soldier refers to, but whose name we cannot mention at this moment, was at that time with the 3rd Battalion, close to the Ukrainian border. The soldier tells her that, to his regret, they are going another way. What way? That is a big secret. He can give her a hint. Maybe she knows the song, "They got orders to go west." She answers, "Blue, yellow," as a reference to the Ukrainian flag. He suggests that Anastasia guessed it well, because he calls her not only beautiful, but also smart. This chat indicates that members of the 3rd Battalion went west to eastern Ukraine. This first lieutenant, whose name has been made unrecognizable here, is now a captain, but we know he belongs to the 53rd Brigade from Kursk. The JIT calls on this first lieutenant or other witnesses to report to us in order to answer a number of questions about his role. Many photos have been posted on social media showing soldiers of the 53rd Brigade that have been made in the summer of 2014 in the border region with eastern Ukraine. These photos were found on accounts of soldiers or their friends or family. The JIT has documents regarding the 53rd Brigade which show exactly which members were present in mid-July 2014 in the area near the Ukrainian border. This concerns both members of the June convoy and other members of the 53rd Brigade who went to the same border region in July 2014. The JIT also knows that the military convoy that went to Milarovo with 6 TILAs in June 2014 returned by train to the base in Kursk with only 5 TILAs in September. Last year we showed you that the Bakhtila with the numbers 3 and 2 on the side from this convoy is the Bakhtila that brought down flight MH17 on the 17th of July 2014. That means members of the 53rd Brigade might know the identity of that specific TILA crew. Those members, and perhaps also the people from their immediate environment, form an important group of witnesses.
Ja, het JIT komt dan ook graag met de...
Well, the JIT would like to get in touch with these people because they could know who the crew of the Bakhtila was that brought down the MH17. So the JIT has the following questions. Who knows whether one or more of these persons were located in eastern Ukraine on the 17th of July 2014? Who knows whether one of more of these people have information about the use of the Bakhtila with the 3 and the 2 on the side skirt on the 17th of July 2014? And who knows which military crew were a part of the crew of the Bakhtila that shot down the MH17? So this call for witnesses is more about the crew. But of course, it's not plausible that the crew decided autonomously to go to the eastern Ukraine, and therefore we are looking for more information about who sent them there. In the months previous to the 17th of July 2014, the leaders of the self-declared People's Republic Donetsk asked for support multiple times to the Russian Federation, and military support, that is. And this was done by the so-called Prime Minister Alexander Borodai as the suspect Igor Girkin, and he was the self-declared so-called Minister of Defense. From our investigation, we know that suspect Girkin was in contact about this with Sergei Aksyonov, and he was the designated Russian leader of the Crimea by the Russian government. And this is the Ukrainian peninsula that was annexed in the spring of 2014 by the Russian Federation. On the 8th of June 2014, Girkin talked with an employee of Aksyonov. And in this conversation, Girkin is asking for military support from Russia, among which good air support with trained staff. Please listen along.
Да, слушаю.
Игорь, здравствуй, это Михаил. Игорь, мне Сергей привез, вот сказал, что хотите выйти на связь, какую-то информацию дать.
Ну, что информацию дать? Собственно говоря, информация, она общеизвестная, что если в ближайшее время не будет масштабной помощи, то задавят. Больше ничего. Помощь нужна действительно масштабная. Уже не хватает того, вот это давать сейчас по чайной ложке, как сейчас. Это роли уже не сыграет. Соотношение сил слишком большое со стороны противника. Если не будет решен вопрос с российской помощью, с воздушным прикрытием и хотя бы чтобы с поддержкой артиллерии, то не удержать нам Восток. Не удержать, однозначно. Нам нужна противотанковая артиллерия, нужны танки, нужны нормальные ПВО, но уже ПЗРК уже не можем обойтись. И все это нужно, естественно, со специалистами, уже готовыми, потому что времени их готовить у нас нет и не будет.
Gherkin is in a hurry because he's about to lose the battle. He wants decent air defense material, no man pads that are fired from the shoulder. And he wants trained staff because there is no time to train them. About 15 minutes after this conversation, Gherkin is called back by Aksionov. In that conversation, Aksionov says that they are already arranging the required permission for the requested support.
Алло.
У меня вечером сегодня связь, 22 где-то будет, сейчас с теми, кто решение это уже принял. И уже лицо, единый координационный центр по этой ситуации уже есть. То есть кто координирует эту картину. Не хочу по телефону в открытой фамилии.
Я понял, понимаю, да. Хорошо, я буду на связи в это время. Ну, в общем, ты понимаешь ситуацию, что здесь...
Понимаю. Там готовят и документы, которые там необходимы там, для поддержки. Там уже вот сегодня тоже вечером у меня вся эта кухня.
Aksionov, the Russian commander in Crimea, assures Gherkin that the support is already being arranged. In June and July of 2014, Gherkin and the self-proclaimed leader of the Donetsk People's Republic, Alexander Borodai, have frequent telephone contact with people in the Russian Federation. Borodai can also be found in Moscow regularly during that period. Gherkin and Borodai together give a press conference in Donetsk on the 10th of July 2014. The latter has just returned from Moscow and gives them the following information about that visit.
Я вел политические консультации, достаточно успешные, на мой взгляд. С кем я встречался, я, конечно, это оглашать не буду. Да? Это тоже некий секрет, если хотите, в области военной тайны. Но я, тем не менее, считаю консультации успешными, и я очень рассчитываю на помощь Российской Федерации в самое ближайшее время.
Apparently, he is not being secretive about the contacts with the Russian Federation. A few weeks earlier, Borodai had already stated in another interview with whom he was in contact in Moscow. In an interview with the Russian newspaper, he mentions that Vladislav Sokov, a high official at the Russian government, is of great support to the Donetsk People's Republic and truly our man in the Kremlin. One day after the press conference, Alexander Borodai, separatist leader in Donetsk, calls this Surkov about the military situation in eastern Ukraine.
Алло. Да, довольно слушаю. Алло. Алло, да. Да, привет, это я. Да, слышу. Ну, я поговорил там с нашими, так сказать, товарищами, самыми старшими, кто там, старшими бывает, кто там отвечает за эту военную историю. Ну, сказал он, мы типа, да, до нас что-то доходит, мы знаем, мы же планируем, немножко переломное действие, там я уже всем уже пропел на эту тему. Да, мы все понимаем, мы готовим. Но я, честно скажу, я не поручусь там за качество этих ответов, поскольку все понимаешь, что они хоть и мои товарищи все, но там доверять полностью, там, что они там готовят или не готовят, нет полностью. Да, я все понимаю, это примерно так. Ну, я в любом случае это все. Неделю продержались, тяжело, но еще продержатся. Ну, да, примерно так. Ну, честно говоря, вот по тону примерно так.
Ja, dit gesprek.
This conversation from the 11th of July 2014 shows that conversations were there about military support by the Prime Minister of the self-proclaimed People's Republic Donetsk with a high government official of the Russian Federation. The anti-aircraft defense that was asked for ever since June 2014 was actually delivered after the 11th of July. And we want to know who was involved in the decision-making process in the Russian Federation and what the assignment was that was sent with the anti-aircraft defense to Ukraine. So the JIT has the following questions. Who decided that Russian anti-aircraft defense, more specifically the TLR with the 3 and the 2 on the side skirts, was heading for Ukraine? Third, who decided who were going to be the crew? What was the assignment given to the crew and who gave those orders? Do you have information? Our contact details can be found on the site of the JIT, www.jitmh17.com. On the website, you can find all the information from the call for witnesses. And of course, here you will also find the information about the extensive witness protection that we have in place. Thank you for your attention. We'd like to go to the questions now. Brechtje van de Moosdijk, spokeswoman at the Public Prosecution Service. We have 15 minutes to answer questions, and then we have some time for one-on-one interviews. We have people with microphones in the room, so if you have a question, please state your name and the medium that you're working for. NOS, Martijn. Good afternoon, Martijn Bink of the NOS News Agency. I have a question for Mr. Westerbeke. Do you have the illusion that on the 19th of March at 10 a.m., 9th of March, 10 a.m., the suspects will actually report themselves in The Hague? And can you tell me what is the value of criminal proceedings if the suspects are not present themselves? I am a realist, meaning that I don't think the odds are on our side. But 5 years ago, when we started this investigation, there were a lot of people who said, well, you can start the investigation, but you won't bring it to a good end. But then when we gave a presentation 2 years later and disclosed our findings, we got the questions, are we going to prosecute suspects? And there weren't a lot of people who thought we were going to get there, but we are taking the step now to prosecute 4 people for downing MH17, a very important step. And we can show that we have the proof and show the family of the suspect, the victims, what happened and how things went. And I think it is of a lot of interest to them, and it was confirmed by a lot of them who I spoke this morning, that they are really happy that we can take this step. RTL News. Fons Lambie, RTL News. Mr. Westerbeek has been lawfully established and convincingly that Russia is involved in downing MH17. Do you think this can be proved? And how do you quantify the cooperation of Russia up until now? And what are the possibilities to force them to cooperate? Well, legally and convincingly can only be proven in court. It's up to the judge. But in our investigation, and I've indicated that last year, we have established that there has been involvement of the Russian Federation when it comes to the downing of MH17 because they made available a bacteria that was used to shoot down MH17, and we have all the material that can substantiate that. So that's a first important answer to that part of the question. This also means that if you look back, you can establish that from the first day after the 17th of July, the Russian Federation has not disclosed anything about what happened, and that is a slap in the face of all the relatives of the victims and the bereaved. And I call out to them to start cooperating, to tell us what happened. If that will happen, we can only wait. Hubert Smeets. Knowledge platform Rama Rusland. How important, Mr. Westerbeke, is it for the rest of the investigation to map out and find the chain of command up to the Kremlin? Do you think you have enough already to prosecute the perpetrators? Well, the step that we've disclosed today, we don't need that. For that, we have decided based on a good case file so far, and we are convinced that we have a file that can bring this case to a good end. So that's not a sine qua non. But we're also still working on everything, meaning that we haven't mapped out everything. And that is the reason why we said today that we will continue. We are going to prosecute, and we have faith, but at the very same time, we will keep investigating in the two directions that we've explained today. Bram Vosko of the AD newspaper. Question from Mr. Westerbeek. How probable do you think it is that before March next year, you will find new suspects, additional suspects? That will be speculation. At this moment, we focus on what we've disclosed today, and that's the fact that we will be prosecuting 4 suspects. The question whether or not other suspects are being added to the list, that's one that I can only answer in the future, and I don't want to speculate. Michael Busse, Deutsche Welle.
Military in Russia were named. You said about disrupting the investigation. What do you exactly mean by that? Maybe you could explain that, please.
A part of your question I didn't understand. So about
You
disrupting.
said you are naming people or starting with charging people who won't disrupt the investigation. And the 4 suspects, there are no active soldiers or any active in Russian military, as far as we know. The question is, you already mentioned a lieutenant who is now a captain, and Mr. Polison said you cannot name him now. Would you please explain this, disrupting the investigation? Why no active soldiers are named?
Well, there's a short answer to that. At this moment, we don't have enough evidence to take that kind of steps towards those people. We have now the information and the proof in our dossier, in our file, to take the step that we are going to take now against the 4 people we mentioned. For others, we are not that far at this moment.
From the radio. Last time there was also a call for witnesses, but that was mostly regarding whistleblowers. Have any whistleblowers come forward since last time? Are people under protection? And also have a follow-up question later on. Well, again, our last call resulted in new witnesses. Well, of course, whistleblowers are always internal people, so it's very hard to distinguish that category. I'm not going to go in further into specific witnesses, but I can tell you that up until this day, new witnesses are coming forward that will get us new insight. We offer protection to anyone that has relevant information for the investigation. And of course, they also have to incur the necessary risk. So we always look at the declarations that people make and the risk that accompanies that declaration. Miss Herentgroen.
How did you manage to disprove and refute the fact that the rocket belonged to the Ukrainian army? It's well known from the official documents that it was in the Ukrainian army since 1986. And a quick follow-up question. During the investigation, the joint team said that you received the Russian radar data and that it was analyzed by the 2 experts that said that they didn't find any practical use in it. Could you tell us more about who are these experts? From which organization, what is their experience, qualification, and how did their analysis look like in concrete terms? Thank you.
Yeah, we received that information from the Russian Federation, the information about the missile and the documents about the missile, and we also received the radar data, and we both studied them, and that's how you must see how we do that in the Dutch investigation. Then we have our own information and our own experts, and they report that, and we also looked at the information from the Russian Federation, and that wasn't clear enough to say exactly what happened with the missile, and that didn't give us the right picture about the radar data. We explained that at other time. The absence of evidence isn't the evidence of absence, because on the radar data we couldn't see the launching of the missile. So experts has to look at this. So what we do in our system, and maybe Mr. Westerbeek can tell more about that, is that we put all that information together. We look at the expert reports of the Russian Federation. We put in front of that our own expert reports, and a judge at the end had to decide whether the proof can stand for court or not.
The question was, who are these experts who looked at the radar data, and what is their qualification experience? Could you elaborate more on that, please?
I think that's too specific for this moment, and we will report that, because in our system is that the experts who will deliver their opinion about the things, is in the report for the judge.
Okay. No, okay.
I've got a question for Mr. Zakaria from NewsHour Dutch TV, Rudy Bauma. Malaysia has been very critical towards evidence against Russia previously. Does Malaysia support the conclusions of the JIT as presented today? And additionally, Mr. Lutsenko, how do you plan to hand over the summons to a suspect who is currently in the DNR?
Yeah, in regard to your questions, Malaysia would like to reiterate our commitment to the JIT in seeking justice and for the victims. And as members, the JIT findings are based on extensive investigations and also legal research. So the objective of JIT is to complete investigations by gathering evidence and witnesses for the purpose of prosecuting the wrongdoers. And Malaysia stands by the rule of law and the due process. So we are with the JIT in regard to the findings.
It was quite hard to hear. Do you support the conclusions?
Talk loud. Support the conclusion. We have not changed our positions.
We will try to arrest this person, and we will make everything we could. And if we would successful, we will organize a video with Dutch court session, and according to our international agreement between Ukraine and Holland, we will fulfill the court sentence to this person.
The gentleman in the back. Okay, you go first. No problem.
Arjen Schreuder from NRC.
Schreuder from the NRC. Before you spoke about a group of 100 people that you were investigating, you've also mentioned that this amount of people, that the group has shrunk. So how many people are we still talking about, the possible, potentially, the group of people that can be prosecuted? Well, currently we're prosecuting 4 persons. Of course, we are furthermore interested in the crew that operated the BUC system. Well, we know that they are about 4 people, so this is also a smaller group. And then, of course, then there's an other framework, the responsibility chain. But, of course, it's very difficult to estimate how many people will be found and also how much proof we can find to implicate these people. But, of course, these are they don't number in the hundreds. So our estimate is that it's a smaller group, but well, it's very hard to specify that at this time. Peter Klein, Airtel News. So that means that you also are investigating towards the Kremlin. I mean, with regards to the tapped conversation that we heard about before. Yes, let it be clear indeed. We want to get a good overview of the chain of command that contributed to the fact that a Buck missile was furnished. And we also want to get more insight into the chain of command so we know who the responsible parties were. Of course, everybody wants to hear about numbers, but we just don't know. If we had the numbers, we would give them to you. But now we try to pick the persons that are the most important ones. And if we know who they are, you will hear from us. The gentleman in the back with the gray T-shirt. I'm from nu.nl. A question to Mr. Westerbeek. How long will this process take? And is it feasible that it will be known exactly who pressed the button, the actual perpetrator? Well, those are two separate questions. Let's start with the first one, the length of the process. Those well-known, those are familiar with Dutch law, know that it all depends on the fact whether or not the suspects are present. If they are not, there will be lawyers that will be talking on their behalf. Also depends on the number of investigative questions. So these are all elements that complicate naming a deadline. So we think that it will take at least a year. It could be longer, maybe even shorter, but I don't expect it will be shorter. And the second question, well, is that realistic? Yes, I do think it's realistic, but we already know more than we show you here. And in the beginning, it was already complex, but still realistic. So we think that it's still feasible that we will come up with more suspects and more evidence. I'm Vincent from Zembla. Well, if there's a process that is held in absentia, will there be any lawyers that represent them? Do you already know? Well, that's a difficult question because it's all up to the court. The court will have to decide how they tackle this. The Dutch penal code doesn't really know that mechanism. I mean, you're either there and then you can get the floor, or you're not. And of course, the Dutch legal system already takes a very active part in the weighing of the evidence, in the decision-making about what should be investigated, also has a lot of leeway in the hearing of witnesses, for instance, about the radar, the experts with the radar. I mean, I'm not going to mention names, but I know that they're very well-versed in their field. So we all have to wait and see what the court will decide. And but I think that everything will be done with the utmost care. And that brings us to the final question. Somebody else, perhaps. Who will be the public prosecutors? Well, I have a team of very competent colleagues that will be responsible for this file, so they will get the necessary support. I'm not going to name any names, but there is a group of public prosecutors with the necessary support, and they will be involved in this case.
Australia. First of all, if I could just ask, are you characterizing the Russian government's attitude as deliberately trying to stop the investigation or to thwart the investigation? Secondly, you mentioned that you would protect witnesses, obviously very difficult. Are you offering asylum? And if you are you then, have you discussed the possibility of those people going to other countries such as those on the jet, including Australia?
I'll pick up the first question, and then Wilbert will take the question about possible witnesses. What I was saying is that we now have the information, have the proof that the Russian Federation is involved in this tragedy, in this crime, in one way or the other. And what I said just now is that one day after 17th of July, they could have been in the position to tell us exactly what happened, because they know. I'm sure they know what happened, because a book Taylor from the 53rd Brigade has been used, and they know this. And they didn't give us this information, I wouldn't call this cooperation.
We gaan nu afsluiten.
We will conclude because we want to start with the one-on-one interviews. Oh, the second part, I'm sorry.
It is good to know that we spoke with about 300 witnesses until now. Gave small evidence, still very important evidence for us. And what I just said in Dutch, we have all proper arrangements for them. And the ultimum is, and we do that with all the countries together, is a witness protection program. That's possible.
Aan getuigen. Oké.
Nee, maar daar kan ik wel iets over zeggen.
I can say something about it. If witnesses pop up and they enter the witness protection program, they have to stay in a country, and then they will get some kind of residency. But we can give you actual information about that because it's a witness protection program, and we never disclose any information about that. But any potential witness it will give them trust if you say something about it. Well, we're telling them that we will if it's necessary, and we can guarantee that. We've made arrangements with various countries so we can offer them that security. But anything we say about it might endanger their safety of those witnesses, and we never do that. So we'd like to conclude. There's some room for one-on-one interviews. We will do that with the people on stage somewhere in the room, but we will close this conversation, this meeting. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being here.